Welcome to this deep dive. We're going to cover the essential theories of power you absolutely need to know for your exam. Okay, so here's the game plan. We'll kick things off by asking, what is power? Then we'll dive into Wrong's four forms, which is a great framework. From there, we'll unpack the five types of authority, look at how the big thinkers disagree, and wrap it all up by seeing how this stuff plays out in international relations. All right, so let's start at the very beginning with the big question. What actually is power? So a really classic place to start is with Robert Dahl. He basically says A has power over B if they can get B to do something B wouldn't normally do. It's that whole power over idea. Super simple, right? Like a parent telling their kid, nope, you're doing your homework now, even when the kid just wants to play video games. Okay, for your exam, you've got to know the difference between these two. Weber's view is all about pushing through resistance, making your will happen no matter what. But Wrong adds this really important twist. He says power has to be intentional. If you accidentally start a fashion trend, for example, that's not power in his book. You didn't mean to do it.
Okay, let's dig a bit deeper with Dennis Wrong's model. This is super useful, seriously. He breaks power down into four distinct forms, which gives you a great way to structure your answers.
First up is force. And look, this isn't just about getting violent. The really key thing to remember about force is what it's good at and what it's not. It's fantastic for preventing action. Think of a police barricade stopping a protest. But it's pretty terrible at compelling someone to do something complex. I mean, you can't really force someone to write a heartfelt apology, can you? And you'll want to know the two flavors this comes in. You've got physical force, which is pretty straightforward. A bouncer physically removing someone from a club. Then there's psychological force, which is way more subtle. Think of a parent using guilt to get their kid to do something. All right, next up, we have manipulation. Now, the absolute key to manipulation is that the target doesn't know it's happening. They think they're making their own choices, but really, someone else is pulling the strings behind the scenes. And that's totally different from persuasion. With persuasion, everything's out in the open. Someone lays out their arguments, you think about them, and you decide for yourself if you agree. It's all about a free and conscious choice. So the last of Wrong's four forms is a big one, authority. And he breaks this down into five types that you really should commit to memory. Authority is all about having the right to command where people feel they ought to obey you. Okay, so here are the five. Let's go through them one by one with some solid examples to make sure you've got them down. So let's break these down. First, coercive authority. That's based on the threat of force. It's the classic, do this or else. Then you've got induced authority, which is the carrot instead of the stick. It's about offering rewards. Think of your boss offering a bonus for good work. Next is legitimate authority. This comes from a position people see as valid, like a democratically elected president. Then competent authority. This is all about expertise. You listen to your doctor because you believe they know what they're talking about. And finally, personal authority. This is pure charisma. Think of someone like Greta Thunberg, who inspires millions without holding any official office. Okay, so now that we have Wrong's framework, here's where it gets really interesting for an exam. Not everyone agrees with him. And these disagreements are where you get the big debates in the field. And a perfect example of this is Hannah Arendt. Her view is completely different. For her, power isn't about domination. It's about people acting together, in concert. It's cooperative. So when she looks at what Wrong calls force, she doesn't see a type of power at all. She sees its exact opposite, violence. Because violence destroys the ability for people to act together. This is a massive clash in how to even define the term. So you've got these clashing views. How on earth do you organize all this for an essay? Well, you need a way to categorize these arguments. And luckily, there's a great tool for this. We can break down the debates into a few key questions. First, intentionality. Does power have to be on purpose? Wrong says yes, but others say, hang on, what about accidental influence? Second, its form. Is power an action, something you do, or is it a capacity, something you have? Third is visibility. Does power have to be out in the open, something you can see, like Dahl argued, or can it be hidden, working behind the scenes? And finally, location. Where do we find power? Is it just in relationships between people, or is it baked into the very structure of society? Okay, let's take all these ideas and see how they work in the real world. Let's talk about international relations. So in IR, the classic distinction you'll hear about is hard power versus soft power. Hard power is your ability to make another country do what you want, usually through military force or economic sanctions. It's coercive. Soft power, on the other hand, is about getting another country to want what you want. It's about attraction, things like cultural influence or appealing political value. But there's another, more subtle form you should know: normative power. This is the ability to shape what's seen as normal on the world stage. The European Union is the textbook example here. They've managed to set global standards for things like human rights and data privacy, defining what's considered legitimate for everyone else. But this kind of power has its limits. See, sometimes actors operate on a logic of consequences. They just calculate the costs and benefits. Joining the EU might make perfect economic sense, but other times actors use a logic of appropriateness. They act based on their identity and what they feel is right or normal for them. So a country might reject joining the EU, even if it's economically beneficial, because they feel it clashes with their core value of, say, independence. What makes sense on paper doesn't always fit with a nation's identity.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground. To really nail these concepts down, you have to apply them. You can find the full summary and a bunch of practice tests over at gradeguru.nl. They'll really help you get ready. So let's recap the absolute key takeaways for your exam. First, remember that power is a contested concept. There's no single easy answer. Second, use Wrong's model: force, manipulation, persuasion, and authority as your bedrock framework. Third, be ready to discuss the big debates around things like intentionality and visibility. And finally, know how to apply all this to the real world with concepts like hard, soft, and normative power in IR. And that leaves us with one final question to think about. In the world we live in today, which of these forms of power, the coercive, the persuasive, or the normative, do you think is actually the most effective at shaping events?